I'm so ready for Robyn to get the hell on. I don't know what to do with myself. Friends, we are here to talk about the Real Housewives of Potomac Season 8 Reunion Part 2. That is a mouthful, but I believe I got it all correct. I thought that this part was really good. Y'all know I am just not a fan of the three-part reunion-isms because they just don't be three-part reunioning like they used to, and they seem to be very excessive and we don't necessarily get anything. Whereas I feel like the first part wasn't necessarily so entertaining, but I did appreciate the conversations that were being had. And this part, I feel like same, appreciated the conversations that were being had, but I was also entertained and I don't even know how to explain it, but it just felt like the things that needed to be said were being said. So we started off, we're still on the heels of this whole Mia and Gordon thing. We don't necessarily get way much. At some point in the season, Mia had that party. It was, I think it might have been the finale party, and Gordon gave that speech, and he was saying it didn't seem like, yeah, Andy was saying it didn't seem like you guys were getting a divorce at that point. Like, Gordon was very complimentary, so it didn't, I didn't get that vibe. And so it's kind of leading itself to this question of, well, Robyn took a lot of heat for not being forthcoming. So, like, how do you feel? Because obviously you guys are on the hill of the divorce, but like you got this big complimentary speech at the finale party. This to me fell extremely flat because, as Mia points out, during the season and actually towards the beginning of the season, she had already told Robyn that she was going to be getting a divorce. So she had kind of been talking about them having issues already. And then we actually do get the, when they did the months later and the divorce is happening or whatever the heck, we get that iconic scene between Mia and Gordon. So that she's been more than forthcoming, in my opinion. We haven't gotten anything from Robyn. And not that Robyn posed that question, but I just don't understand the conversation we're having here. I couldn't really tie into it either because then, of course, Jazelle and Robyn start posing questions to Mia like, okay, so like, well, are you ending the marriage because of his age? Or are you ending the marriage because you found out that, he doesn't have any money anymore? And she's like, it's not really that. And at first I was like, is she lying? But as I'm listening to what she's saying, things had gotten so bad, which she's already said to her credit. But she's like, things had gotten so bad to the point where it felt like abuse. He had emptied out her bank account when he found out that she was filing for divorce and waking her up at 4 o'clock in the morning to, have business meetings. She also told us before, what was she saying? He locked her in the room. So all that stuff. So that's the stuff that kind of made her want to get the divorce, I guess, from what she's saying. So I still just don't get this narrative of trying to piece things together. Like, the lady has already told us, and I'm just not buying the she's not forthcoming thing. Mia has her flaws, but she's been more forthcoming for damn sure than Jazelle and Robyn. Like, girl. We move in and Andy kind of digs into it a little bit more. This I could buy into because it's relevant to the season, and it did occur where she said she came into the marriage with more money than Gordon because she had this inheritance. And she actually did clear it up really well. Whether it's substantiated, I don't know. Whether it will be substantiated, I don't know, because I don't really care. But the story sounded convincing to me, and I'm fine with it. But essentially, she says about a year or so before they got married, she lost three grandparents and she came into some money. But then shortly thereafter, the year later when they got married, she noticed that she said he was functioning kind of like bankrupt, like he was kind of overspending and frivolously spending, which she also said in that iconic scene. So it kind of made sense to me. And then Jazelle again jumps in and she's like, well, good question though. She's like, do you feel kind of duped essentially? Like, you thought you were marrying this rich man and then he wasn't rich. And she says, no, like, I kind of just feel like I wish I would have known, that he was having these issues and then we could have kind of like figured it out. So I think Mia handled that phenomenally. There was still this continuation of like I guess it just kind of felt like trying to catch Mia up, but she's just not really in that space anymore where she's just lying in my opinion. Or maybe she's just gotten better, but to me she seems like she's telling the truth. But whatever. They then are asking her kind of like, where she lives and what's the situation with this lawsuit where they owe rent. And she admits, that they owe rent on the old place because Gordon refused to move out. She moved out and they're being sued because she's not going to pay all of it. He has to pay his bulk of it and she'll contribute, I guess, whatever the hell. I don't care. But then Robyn, who has more questions for anybody's situation than her own, self-awareness, she asked, okay, well, can we clarify like where you're living? Because first you're here, then you're in Atlanta. It's like, girl, what difference does it make? And she's like, girl, I'm all over. I'm worldwide. Shout out to Candy. Like, girl, what difference does it make? Like, shut up. And we also, this part was a clip, and I just didn't give a damn. And I mean, the opinion is obvious, but we'll touch on it. We talk about how when her divorce was announced, you know, everybody reached out to her besides Candice and Wendy. Candice and Wendy. Why in the hell would Candice and Wendy, of all people, reach out to Mia regarding her divorce? Like, I understand that they are in a better place now, and it seems like they're kind of getting along, but we know their history, and separately, neither one of those situations are good. So I don't even know why that would be an expectation. I don't know why that's a conversation that we're having. I really just hate to like waste time on stuff that doesn't have any, like, why. But at the end of the day, Candice and Wendy take accountability. They do explain though that, like, you know, essentially they didn't reach out, but Gordon was reaching out to their husbands, trying to, you know, and saying a lot of things about Mia that they did not bring to the forefront, given their history, right? They definitely could have, and they didn't. So it shows love and respect to Mia, and Mia acknowledged that, but still she's thinking like, y'all still could have checked on me with the divorce. I disagree heavily, so did the internet, so we can really move on with that, but they did take the accountability, and they're, you know, apologizing, unlike other people. We get to the Jazelle package about her dad, which is obviously extremely sad. It was, I don't want to say it was nice. It was different to see her get emotional, but it is kind of nice just because you get to see that other side of it. You don't see that from Jazelle, but things are definitely going to go downhill for her quickly like they typically do because she's Jazelle. We talk about the part where, you know, Wendy has said during the season that she didn't have much, like she feels bad for Jazelle, but she's not going to go and comfort Jazelle because she feels like Jazelle was saying nasty things about her mother at a time when she was in the hospital. And there was a conflict about that a little bit. I don't remember where it came from, whether it played out on the season or whether it was the socials, but somebody had brought to the forefront that her mother was not in, like, nobody knew that her mother was in the hospital. And Wendy had explained, this happened on the show, Wendy explained that that's irrelevant. Like, that's not the point. At the end of the day, you shouldn't be discussing anybody's parents at all. The ironic thing is that she was in the hospital. So it's like you're discussing something that you shouldn't be discussing. And also, surprise, my mom's in the hospital. So you definitely should not be discussing her. That's the point. So it was very funny that Jazelle thought that she had this very big gotcha moment. And she's like, let me address this first. Like, I didn't know your mother was in the hospital. That's not a home run. Like, the point is that you shouldn't be discussing her mother at all, whether her mother is in the hospital or not. Like, is that how we define when to say negative things about each other? Like, oh, she's in the hospital, so let me not talk about her, but next week when she hopefully gets out, I'll read her. Girl. I also thought it was extremely weird, like, for very obvious reasons. When Jazelle's talking about her father, obviously people are going to get emotional. And in those people that got emotional was also Ashley. I'm glad that we got to see that on camera. She wasn't necessarily crying, but you could tell that she was holding back tears. So I think it's just a very odd question to ask why Candice is getting emotional. To Andy's credit, I don't think that he was asking to say, like, why are you crying? You shouldn't be crying. I think he really was trying to get to the point of what's getting you there, like what's actually moving you, because he was trying to make that very long-winded point of, look, she has empathy for Jazelle, but he really could have just said that instead of asking a really dumb question, because we also have people on the internet that are asking it in a different way, and they're like, well, Candice cries about everything, why is she crying? And then you got Jazelle being an idiot, and she's like, well, she cries about things that don't even have anything to do with her. And it's like, yeah, because she's having empathy for you. So you sound extremely stupid. In that, like, package video, or I don't know if it was a different one, we also get that scene of when Jazelle was talking about, you know, her daughter going away to college, and Wendy and Candice made that face at each other. And Andy asked a very, I think it was relevant question, because the topic came up that, you know, Karen treats them differently. So he asked Karen, you know, do you think that you should have taken a stronger stance, you know, against Wendy and Candice making these faces? And Karen has just really been hitting the nail on the head. She says that doesn't have anything to do with me. Like, I am not in charge of what any of these ladies do. Let me make that clear first. Like, that has nothing to do with me. If they want to make a face, they want to make a face. They want to make a face. That has nothing to do with Karen. And now that I've said that, let me also say I've seen everybody in this group make faces while somebody else is talking. And that immediately, because that's a nail on the head. At that point, to me, the house is built. Like, honestly, with that one nail, chapel. So Jazelle is heated because she knows that the point has been made, and she's like, Karen, don't do that. Don't do, no, girl, because it's valid. Like, y'all all do the same stuff. And Jazelle's like, she's talking about my child. She's talking about my child. Candice jumps in and she says, I regret. And it starts to sound like it's going to be an apology, but she says, I regret that Jazelle keeps using her children and weaponizing them to make myself and Wendy look bad. And again, another nail on the head. Like, literally, I believe that there was a row of houses that was built at that point, and we're going to keep on building, honey, because it doesn't make any sense. And then she also says, Jazelle, in her defense, she's like, I never weaponize my children. And I am disappointed that we didn't get like the flashback of when she did the thing about her house. And she was like, oh, Candice talked stuff about the house that I built for my children, weaponizing her children. And then the whole thing with Wendy, where she was like, Wendy looked at my daughter funny. Like, you weaponize your children all the time when it's very convenient. Like, everything about Jazelle is convenience, and it's bullcrap. Another segment that's very unnecessary is talking about Jazelle's dating and how vague it is. I guess I can appreciate us touching on it because it's obviously a premeditated storyline, which fell pretty flat. And then Jazelle tried to get in front of it by saying, well, we're not even dating anyway, because he got caught on social media with other girls. So Jazelle had to cover up her story, and it really wasn't a good storyline. So now we're talking about it, and she's, kind of doubling down and saying, she didn't even mention it at first, took Andy to ask and say, like, okay, again, he was seen on social media dating these girls, and now, she's like, well, I just have so much going on, and like, what he does out of my eyesight, I don't really have time for, like, it is what it is. And all of that is fair, and I could give you those points if it wasn't strategically for you trying to get ahead of it. Because at the end of the day, your storyline this season was going to be that you were dating this other Bravo celebrity, and you thought that that was going to be this big deal. But then he was out doing his thing, and he only filmed on the show once. So that just didn't work. Now you have to downplay it and say, like, oh, we're just very casual. Like, we see whoever, blah, blah, blah. And then when asked, like, okay, well, then who else are you dating? She's being extremely vague. So it's like, why you all up in Mia business and trying to clarify? You and Robyn are doing this with y'all one brain that you share, and you're trying to clarify everything about Mia's business. But then when asked about your business, you have nothing. We get to a package about Candice, and first they talk about the Drew Sidora thing that happened on the premiere. That was super weird. That also fell flat. And I can appreciate them doing that because that's another kind of like premeditated, super fake storyline that I feel like the powers that be were trying to push and make it very weird between Candice and Drew, because there's obviously some tea to it. And I mean, I just don't think that it was really that deep, but fine for, continuation. We're going to touch on it. We're going to explain it, I guess. And Candice, I really didn't fully pick up on it because she was vague about it, but I guess that makes sense. But she essentially said, the way that she does business is not the way that business had been done. And I'm not clear if that means between she and Drew. I'm not clear if that means between their people. But at the end of the day, it seems like when it occurred, and based off of where that Drew was tweeting at that time, that there was no issue. Now, the way that it's explained on the reunion, because it was vague, it does kind of leave room for interpretation. And so I don't know if Drew will maybe feel some type of way about that, and then maybe they may have an issue, but who knows? At the end of the day, it kind of seems like it's a non-issue, and Candice is no longer on the show, so we're not gonna get back around to it. We also talk about the lawsuit with Michael Darby. I literally honestly don't have much to say about it. It was dismissed. I don't know if I ever really, maybe I did see that it was dismissed, but I never really paid much attention to it because it never had merit to me. I'm not the judge or the jury on that case, but I knew that case wasn't going anywhere. And I guess if it requires analysis, I don't think that Ashley was lying when she said she didn't know anything about it, but I also kind of don't care, because whether she knew anything about it or not, it really wouldn't matter. It wouldn't move the needle. So I don't care. So now we get to the Robyn and Candice, which I'm going to say up front I thought was excellent, because even when Andy introduced it and he's like, I want to boil things down, I was starting to feel good about it, because I think that he was realizing, okay, we obviously have a lot of BS around this and minutia, a lot of arguing that we can do above the surface. We've done it all season. We already did it on part 1 of the reunion. Let's kind of dial it back a little bit. And he says, let's break the fourth wall, right? Like, let's really chat. And I think we're still trying to figure out with Robyn what is actually the issue, right? And so he asked her, is it that you felt like, Candice was kind of coming for your job and kind of trying to get you to lose your job, essentially? And she does dance around it a bit, but she, to me, as I'm listening and reading between the lines, she's being clear that she doesn't feel like that necessarily, but she does feel like Candice was criticizing her job, which could obviously lead to other things. So it made sense to me. Not necessarily trying to get her fired, but you're criticizing my job, so that can put the eye on me. So that's understandable. I really loved, though, how Candice was able to give us a timeline and essentially explain, that they had done the reunion, and shortly thereafter the reunion, she and Robyn had this very weird back and forth on Instagram. Not necessarily a back and forth, but an exchange where she was giving a genuine compliment to Robyn and saying she liked her hair, and Robyn responded with shade. And so that was weird because Candice like, well, I didn't, obviously you would think I didn't know we had an issue. So Candice asked her in that text or DM on Instagram, are you mad at me? She didn't respond. And then subsequently, the thing happened with the lawsuit with Juan, I believe it was, when Candice reached out, and she reached out again and basically implied like, I don't know where we are with things, but I hope you're doing well, whatever the hell. Robyn didn't respond again. So then she's explaining the purpose of this timeline is to say, yeah, by the time that the Patreon thing happened where you're selling this story, I was really heated with you and I felt like you were really on one, and now it seems like there's some weird stuff going on with you. So that's what she was trying to explain. Whether it be rational for anybody or not, it was nice to get the context because it makes sense. Whether you agree or not, it makes sense why she would feel that way. And I do love, at least in response, that Robyn was able to be clear and say, okay, and then we're at that point when it comes to me not responding, she says it's because the whole colorism thing really hurt her, the accusations, and her not really knowing how to deal with it. And Candice is saying, like, I can understand how that can be hurtful. I'm sure we can all understand that. But I wish that we could be clear that that's, again, not Candice's fault at the end of the day. Though the colorism allegations did not start and will not end with Candice and Wendy on this show. It did not happen like that. The audience on Twitter was discussing colorism a season or two before it was ever brought up on the show. Literally by the time that it was discussed on the show by way of Candice and Wendy, because they were the only ones that were going to be able to discuss it as brown-skinned women, we were literally like, thank God, because we've been saying this for, it was literally one of those things where it's like, oh, y'all are awake. Like, because we had already been talking about that. So for Jazelle and Robyn to kind of put it on Candice as if she's the one that spearheaded this, it's absolutely insane because we all know that that's not true. Then she explains, coupled with the colorism thing, she's now getting the stuff about Juan, and then, obviously Candice is on Twitter talking about that as well. So all of that just really affected her. And for me, that just felt very much so like victim. Like, I just cannot empathize with that. Like, I can understand, just like I said with Candice, I'm going to be fair. I love that she gave us the context, great, and it makes sense for her, but I don't agree. I can be very clear that I don't agree with that because I just feel like that's Robyn playing victim. I can understand the fact that your friend has played some type of a part in it, so that's going to hit you differently because obviously you're getting the criticism from the world and your friend is adding on to that criticism. So I can understand that being hurtful, but it leading to this magnitude for Robyn, like the friendship is demolished or whatever the hell she said. I can't because it feels like she's wanting Candice to have some responsibility for how the world feels about the colorism issue and how the world feels about the Juan thing, because that's what's really bothering Robyn. Robyn is embarrassed that the world has been on her ass and that Candice played a part in it. But Candice is not the cause of the world having an adverse opinion about you, Robyn. That started season 1. Then Jazelle jumps in and she's adding even more heat to the fire, essentially saying the same thing she said in the first part, that Candice was the one that said that they were colorists. Well, essentially the issue becomes, they're like, well, you didn't say that we weren't colorists. And I'm like, but she actually did. And I love that Wendy was able to bring it up. And I literally hugged my TV when they played the clip, because I remember making a mental note of, well, that's good that Candice said that she literally said, I don't think that they're colorists, but it is a conversation that should be had. She said that, and it was at the reunion. It's in the same setting that you guys are in right now. please, let's clock on our memories. Like, what's going on? Candice starts to explain. Basically, she's trying to say what Wendy said in a more direct way. But she's explaining, you know, in my household, we had conversations about race and things like that. And I mistakenly thought that you guys would be open to having conversations like that. And Jazelle is clocking what she's trying to say, even though she's trying to say it in a nice way. Jazelle's like, well, I went to an HBCU and I'm part of a Divine Nine organization. That doesn't mean that you're not ignorant. And that does not mean that you don't have the capacity to have conversations that don't benefit you. They only make you uncomfortable. So no matter where you come from, it doesn't matter. You're uncomfortable. Robyn has already acknowledged, oh my God, I'm crying because I was uncomfortable with that conversation. You're not supposed to be comfortable with the conversation. And nobody is supposed to have sympathy for you because you're uncomfortable in a conversation. That sounds ridiculous. And just because you went to a historically black college and you were a part of a Divine Nine organization does not mean that you are equipped to have these type of conversations that don't benefit you any type of way. They admittedly make you uncomfortable and they're adverse to you. And it's an adverse opinion that everybody has. And it's very clear that it's a conversation that you don't want to have. So you're not proving to anybody that you can have it because you haven't shown us that you could have it in the past 3 years that we've been talking about it. So Wendy has to come in now and explain it in a more direct way. Like, y'all don't have the capacity to have this conversation at the end of the day. And oddly enough, Karen was jumping in. I felt like she was kind of feeling offended by it. And I can understand her trying to stand up for the group, but she was dead ass wrong by saying, you know, if anybody on this, of all the black women on Bravo, we are the most equipped to have this conversation. No, you're not. We all watched that reunion and how embarrassingly bad that conversation went and how the women sitting on that couch with you could not be more disinterested in having that conversation and taking any accountability. And Wendy cleared it, clocked it. Y'all are more worried about the fact that you're being called colorist and you're not literally looking at why are you being called a colorist. The issue is, why is colorism an issue on this show? It's not that you're being called a colorist. That's the victim card that they're playing. It's like, why are you calling me that? Why are you calling me that? No, why are you being called that is what should be being analyzed. We're talking about the completely wrong thing. And just this completely turned me off. Aneka is in, because obviously she wasn't there, and she's asking like, okay, so then why were they calling you a colorist? Kind of on the side of the couch. And Robyn literally dismisses the whole issue of colorism that all of the viewers have been talking about for the last few years. She just literally took it, balled it up, wiped her ass with it, and threw it across the couch like Juan. She says every time that we get into it with them, we're labeled as colorists. After all of these conversations, and after we're sitting here now arguing that you guys have the capacity to have the conversation, you guys have the range, and you guys are not colorists, you literally sit here in a matter of 3 seconds and tell another brown-skinned woman, well, every time we get into it with these brown-skinned women, we're labeled as colorists. Like, it's nothing. It's BS. That's absolutely insane. And after hearing something like that, if I see that Robyn Dixon is still working on this show next season, there's going to be confusion is not a strong enough word. To close that out, Candice essentially says what we've all been saying. You know, worse has been done to Robyn. It's been echoed by Karen as well twice now, in part 1 and in part 2. Beyonce, Act 1, Act 2, Karen has said Robyn is playing the victim. Worse has been done to her. It's really not that big of a deal. And at the end of the day, if that's the reason that you want to chop the friendship, so be it. I did love, though, how, because obviously when they're having the conversation, Robyn and Candice does apologize for hurting Robyn. Like I said, you know, Robyn had that opportunity to break it down and say she was hurt, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Candice very clearly says, I apologize for hurting you because that was not my intention. And that happened before a commercial break, and I already knew she was not going to get the acknowledgement for it. So at the very end, I did love that Aneka was like, okay, but she did apologize to you. Like, how do you feel about that? And of course, Robyn says, but she still feels like I plotted against her. The line is indeed always moving. Just like Juan. I didn't really understand the part backstage where Aneka is kind of like hyping herself up. I don't know if she had an opportunity to think like I'm not really giving in this reunion, but she has had some good moments. I mean, I think she's doing fine, but yeah, I don't know. I don't understand the pep talk thing that's going on, but whatever. The husbands are coming out. We got this clip over the week, and Andy is essentially asking, you know, Chris about the whole Robyn situation. He lets him know, quite frankly, he doesn't give an F. He does not care. He's over it. It has happened. He's asking him why he hasn't been around. Another very obvious question, but I guess we have to have that conversation. Chris is like, baby, if they don't want me around, then I'm not going to be around. Very simple. Like, Chris is very short and to the point. I'm living for it. I don't know if he's upset, but because I would hate to wish this on him to be perpetually upset, but this is the mood, honey. This is the energy that we need. And then if that's not enough, we're now getting Robyn digging more into another man's business whose name is not Juan. She's asking Chris about these screenshots. What about the screenshots? What about the screenshots? And then she's like stuttering and Chris is like, baby, I don't know that girl. We've already acknowledged that the girl said that she made it up. I'm not going to keep having this conversation with you. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand. And I completely feel like Jazelle and Robyn are behind this whole rumor. Like, they're literally so steadfast in it. Like, I would get a t-shirt that says, what about the screenshots? But the screenshots, Robyn said it at least 13 times between part 1 and part 2. Girl, like, let it go. And I mean, Chris, when I told y'all we were going to build communities by hitting the nail on the head, Jazelle obviously jumps in. She's like, well, I don't understand. Like, I'm appalled. Like, why would you think that we will be behind that? And she goes down this dissertation about, I don't know that lady and da-da-da-da-da, and I don't know this and blah, 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 blah. And Chris says, well, girl, that's how Candice feels. And we talk about feelings, right? You want to talk about feelings? You were feeling 2 years ago that I was inappropriate with you and you felt uncomfortable or whatever the hell. This is how Candice feels. You have your feelings. She has her feelings. And Jazelle's just buttoned like a shirt. Because, girl, yeah. Next question, please.
Candice said she feels that way. Much like you said you feel a way about what happened 2 years ago. People feel how they feel. So you want to be acknowledged for your feelings? Let her be acknowledged for her feelings.
Great.
Fantastic. Next question. Okay.
You would have thought that I was in here watching the NBA finals, and I don't even watch that. I've probably never seen one. But I imagine that I would just be loud. I don't want to do it on the mic, but I'm loud clapping, baby. And I'm snapping, hooting, tooting, perooting around my apartment because he ate that on up. And in closing, he says that he thinks it's very funny that Candice has to be, accountable for her words. But Jazelle has acknowledged now a couple times that she had a misspeak. She said the wrong thing, and everybody's just like, okay, well, it's fine. Like, you mischaracterized, it is what it is. And she only gets a slap on the wrist. But every time Candice opens her mouth, honey, we have to have a think piece. Insane. And at the very end, we kind of leave off on Gordon. Like, we keep getting this, like, hint that he's going to give us this big news, and, like, Mia gets emotional. So I really keep trying to think about what it is, not necessarily too hard, but not because I don't care, but I'm just so busy. But, it seems like it's going to be a big thing because they keep cliffhanging it. So we'll see what happens, and I'm interested to hear from both he and Mia at the same time, because I think we are getting good information from Mia, and she is being forthcoming. And I think the stories are going to match. It's just going to give us more information, and I'm going to enjoy that. So I really enjoyed this part of the reunion. I don't understand why Robyn has more questions for everybody and their man than she has for Juan. I don't even think she asked Juan, like, what time is it? Like, I just don't know if that's allowed. So it's very interesting. Maybe it's because she's out and, like, this is her opportunity to ask questions. Maybe that's why she's doing so much. So, but if you haven't, like, clocked the, like, extremely quick decline of Jazelle and Robyn, I don't know if you are watching this show. I think you might be on a different channel. But we'll see what happens in the last part of this reunion. How much deeper can Robyn and Jazelle dig? See ya.